Here this evening, and there we go. We have with us this evening a number of distinguished guests. So I want to make sure I take just a moment to introduce a few folks around the Zoom room. We are pleased that all of you are here, and I know we'll have individuals joining over the course of the conversation as well. So we'll make sure to have a really comprehensive and exciting Zoom conversation going in the chat. You'll be able to do that. If you have comments, you can put them there. But I first want to make sure that I take a moment to recognize the fact that we're here this evening with the Matriots. And the Matriots started, as you all know, back in 2017 with 6 women who marched at the Women's March in Washington, D.C. And they came back with an idea and a vision for how to make a difference in Ohio. And that is what we have done over the course of the last 5 years. We have endorsed 322 candidates in 35 of our 88 counties. We have been a force across the state looking at how to promote women who will help other women prosper and thrive here in Ohio. And it is so important that we gather together on moments like this when we have a very unique ticket before us at the state level. We have an all-woman ticket for governor and for lieutenant governor, a previously endorsed Matriots candidate for lieutenant governor, and we have come together to endorse Nan, and I want to make sure that I also introduce the individuals on the screen who have gotten us to where we are, which is first of all of you are members, all of you have given to endorse our candidates. You know, we give no endorsements without money attached to those endorsements. We believe that to be an incredibly important part of what we do at the Matriots. And so each and every one of you who is on this phone call today is so incredibly important to the Matriots mission and the work that we are doing. We could not be here. I would not be sitting in this seat as your CEO without the support of each of the individuals around the screen. And I also want to make sure that I recognize individually those 6 marchers who laid the groundwork for where we are today. You know, we have Mindy Coffey, we have Rebecca Ebel, we have Sally Crane Cox, Sharon Steele, Kathy Kobacker, and April Zimmerman Katz, all who were marchers back in 2017 and who brought the vision of the Matriots to start today. We also have many actually on this call today, many founding members of the organization who are here today. And if you are a founding member, I would love if you would click on your little reaction button. So at the bottom of the screen, over towards the right-hand side, you'll see a little smiley face with a plus. You can click on the reaction and add a heart or a hand and show me and my fellow Matriots here that, yes, I was a founding member. I was there from the start. And I am still with you all today. So you can scroll back through the screens, everybody, and see all the founding members who are with us today. I want to be sure I also thank our PAC board, April Zimmerman Katz, Valerie Lemmy Thomas, Sue Bodagy, Holly Fowler Martins, Barbara Fillion, Lon Cherie Billingsley, Jill Brown Dean, Eric Kearney, Rita Danish, Myrita Craig, and Karen Huff, many of whom are here today and for whom I am so thankful. Their dedication in getting all of the endorsements through and also helping vision plan for the organization as we move forward. We also have Matriots Education Fund board members here today, Dara Pizzuti, Laurel Beatty Blunt, Cassie Baker, Kathy Little, and Karina Brown out there in the audience, but also helping support the Matriots mission in education and research. And Terry Gare, a member of our Matriots Action Fund board, also helping round out the team of individuals who are working as board members for the Matriots to support our work moving forward. I also, because I get the opportunity, I have the microphone, right? Like you could turn me off, I suppose, but I have the opportunity to also thank our formerly endorsed candidates, because I see some of those on our call today as well. So I want to thank our formerly endorsed candidates specifically because you have carried the mantle of the work that we do out into the community. You are making life better for women in Ohio. Whether you are an endorsed candidate who has won your race, or you're an endorsed candidate who now talks about the vision of the Matriots and supports other candidates in their races, you have changed the face of what Ohio looks like. You have helped propel and normalize candidacy. And so for that, we are so thankful as Matriots for you, our endorsed candidates. If you're an endorsed candidate and you've been an endorsed candidate, feel free to click now on your reactions. I would love if you would click the little horn that celebrates. I don't know what else you call that. The horn that the celebration horn. If you could click that, if you have been an endorsed candidate, you are a woman who has run for office and we have supported your run. And I know I have one on the phone today, Cheryl Stevens, who, as I mentioned, is the running mate for Nan Whaley. And that brings me to talk about Nan. I get to talk with Nan, but before I talk with Nan, I get to talk about her and why we decided to endorse Nan. So as you probably know, Nan grew up in a small town, actually in Indiana, not here in Ohio, but she moved to Ohio to attend the University of Dayton. And I'm sure that you know about her connections to Dayton, but she became the first person in her family to graduate from college. And she has learned, and we've seen this as Matriots, the values of hard work, strength, and resilience. And she learned that from her dad, who she's talked about often and told us that he was a union worker at an auto company who lost his job, but that he never lost his dignity. And she also talks about her mom, who went on to work at a laundromat to help make ends meet. She was first elected as mayor back in 2013 and has fought down tough challenges out in Dayton. And she's going to talk a little bit about that with us today. She's currently running against a single other candidate for the Democratic primary on May 3rd. That other candidate is a male. I'm not going to mention his name. You're welcome to Google if you do not know who she's running against. But if she wins, she'll move on when she wins. Let's go with when she wins. She'll move on in the November election to be placed against the successful Republican candidate from the May 3rd election as well. We asked her what a Matriots endorsement would mean, and she said, look, I run into your members all over the state. They always ask me whether I have the Matriots endorsement yet. They're waiting to hear from you. We reviewed Nan and we endorsed her back in January, and we are looking eagerly forward to May with great expectation. This all-woman ticket is in a state that has never elected a female governor, never elected a female senator, and currently has not one single woman elected to statewide executive office. It is time for change. Nan is here to talk with us about what change could look like, and I'm really pleased to be able to chat with her this evening and to draw on questions that you all, many of you, submitted for us to consider. So Nan, I want to give you some time and some space to talk yourself about what you see as the future, and then we'll just have a little conversation around these questions.
Thanks, Emily. And it's great to see so many friendly faces. Nancy, I liked that you did your Nan fan on the screen. Thank you very much. It's a sign you've been to some events with us as we've traveled the 88 counties. And Emily, I'm also really excited that my Lieutenant Governor candidate, Cheryl Stevens, the former mayor of Cleveland Heights and Cuyahoga County Council, is on. We are really excited about this ticket. It is a bold new ticket for sure. When you see Cheryl and I, we're both from the working class and proud to be a part of it. And are, I think like most women, working to get stuff done to make a difference in our communities. And I think, frankly, we need a little more of that in the State House. It's been a great honor to be the mayor of Dayton these past 8 years. I loved being a mayor. Mayors are places where folks can be visionary, but still have to take care of business, like get the potholes filled and make sure the snow is taken off. And you really don't have the luxury of saying that's not my problem. And certainly the summer of 2019 put a fine point on that for me. In the space of 10 weeks, we experienced in Dayton a KKK rally that came to our town to incite hate and fear, which I think the New York Times headline said it best, hate comes to Dayton and Dayton sends it back. Secondly, 2 days later, we had 15 tornadoes rip through our city for the first time in the history of our community. And then 10 weeks later, we experienced a senseless mass shooting that left 9 people dead and 27 injured in the course of 32 seconds. We hosted a vigil the day after the shooting, really to hold on to our friends and neighbors. And when Governor Mike DeWine took to the stage to speak, he heard the people in Dayton shout in frustration, "Do something, do something." Well, I'm running for governor because I intend to do something. Now, it is also fair to say that when I came in as mayor of Dayton, Dayton was at a low point. All of our Fortune 500 companies had left the city and the region. We led the nation in accidental overdose deaths. And we had, a pretty tough Great Recession, one of the worst in the country, just because of our reliance on manufacturing. But as mayors, you take action, you do something. And so the first thing we did was actually bring the community together to deal with accidental overdose deaths with the opioid epidemic. We were the first city in the state, the 4th in the country, to sue the drug companies and hold them accountable for this epidemic. And we won, bringing millions of dollars to local communities across the state. And then, really the second piece that was so important is we treated addiction like the disease that it is. In Dayton, we cut accidental overdose deaths in half, and they have stayed down even through the COVID pandemic, when we see in the nation, we had the most number of accidental overdose deaths in 1 year last year at over 100,000 people of lives lost. We saw too that our kids were entering kindergarten unprepared. So again, bringing teachers, the business community, nonprofits together. We passed high quality preschool for every single 4-year-old. It was so successful that last summer we added every 3-year-old too. We know the cost of childcare is a huge burden, particularly on women. 2 million women have opted out of the workforce in America because of the pandemic, and also because they cannot pencil out childcare. It has become so scarce or so expensive that these decisions have been just opting out of the workforce. Childcare right now in Ohio costs almost $14,000, as much as a year of tuition. And we know that women do most of the work in the home in addition to working, still about 70% of the work in the home. And so it was on them to figure this out. And that's what we've seen across the country, is people opting out, particularly women opting out of the workforce. So having high quality preschools made a great difference, not only for our kids, but for women and parents as well. Now, I've seen this. We've been to all 88 counties in the state. March 31st was our last county in Wilmington, Ohio, and Clinton County. And we see this all across the state. We see local leaders doing their level best, trying to move their community forward. And we don't see any help from the State House. And that's what this race is about for us. We know we have to have all communities grow across the state for the state to be prosperous. And we need real leadership at the State House to do that. So here's what Cheryl and I want to do. We want to make sure your pay goes up, your bills go down, and you have a state government that actually works for you. So what do I mean by that? Well, first, I mean that one good job should be enough no matter what work you do in Ohio. We need to raise the wage for all Ohioans, including raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We also need to invest in new technologies like renewable energies. Cheryl and I are proud to have the endorsement of the Ohio Environmental Council. They've never endorsed in a primary before. Making sure that we're making the wind turbines and the solar panels in our state. Instead, right now, Michigan and Pennsylvania are eating our lunch on these manufacturing pieces because they actually have a renewable energy portfolio. So making sure we invest in new technologies. And then something that's so important to my lieutenant governor candidate is really investing in small businesses. We know when we invest in small businesses, number one, they're mostly women owned or owned by people of color. And number two, it's in big cities and small, that you can really invest in small businesses across the state. So cities like Portsmouth can win, while cities like Columbus win too, which we right now have seen a real uneven investment in economic development. So raising wages is key. At the same time, we know we got to get bills down. By investing in childcare across the state, this would make a big difference, bringing women back into the workforce if it's their choice, but also making sure our kids are ready for kindergarten and having real childcare opportunities across the state so it's not so scarce, and also raising the wage for childcare workers. Right now, childcare is so scarce that the cost is continuing to go up and up. The only way around this is for the state to really invest. If Ohio is going to be a place that is family friendly, we need to make it so by investing in our children and women across the state. We also, just 2 weeks ago, we were in Youngstown. We announced our prescription drug plan. Going after pharma again, like I have in the past, to make sure that they don't price gouge, because right now we see too many seniors having to make tough decisions about putting food on their table or getting life-saving medicine. Also capping insulin cost at $30 a month, something that the state of Kentucky has done. And no offense, if Kentucky can do it, so can Ohio. Getting costs down for folks is key, so they have these basic kitchen table issues. And then obviously getting our utility costs under control, considering we're still paying for the first energy scandal, the largest bribe scandal in Ohio history, on our electric bill every month. So I don't think this is really rocket science, Emily, pay up, bills down. The reason why we can't have it in Ohio is because the FBI has called the Ohio State House the most corrupt in the country, which takes some work, y'all. That takes some work. And it's all around the First Energy scandal. First Energy, a company so wealthy that they own the naming rights to the Brown Stadium, bankrolled Mike DeWine's campaign 4 years ago. And in return, they've gotten everything they wanted, including a $1 billion bailout. We're paying every single month on our electric bill. They wanted their top lobbyist to be the top utility regulator. DeWine appointed him, even though 11 of his staff members, we found out 2 weeks ago, told him and wrote memos saying this was a bad idea. Mike DeWine did it anyway. When the FBI was raiding this lobbyist's house, Mike DeWine went to the press and said he was a great guy. And when First Energy settled with the Department of Justice, they admitted in the agreement, and they settled for the largest amount in American history. To give you an idea of how large this bribery scandal is, they admitted in the agreement that they bribed the guy with $4 million to look out for them, not us. So the first thing I did when I announced I was running for governor was put together an anti-corruption plan. You can check it out at nanwhaley.com/ethics. It's about making sure politicians don't police themselves. Clearly, that's not working at the State House. Stopping the revolving door between corporations and government. You can work for corporations, you can work for government, and you can't work for both at the same time. And then making sure we have transparency in the money that's in our politics. So that's the work that's ahead for Cheryl and I as we work on to take this state. We feel really good both about the primary and the general. And I want to talk a little bit about electability for a minute, because it is true. Emily knows I'm the only woman running for governor. And as a matter of fact, Cheryl is the only woman running for lieutenant governor. So we're pretty easy to find on this ballot. But as Democrats, and I know this is a bipartisan group, we looked in 2018 when we came so close as Democrats, why we kept on coming short in Ohio, but places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, our neighbors were winning. And we particularly looked in Detroit and Michigan, and looked at the collar counties around Michigan. And what we found is that in Michigan, they were performing, Democratic candidates were performing 6 to 10 points better, particularly around those collar counties, when we compared them to Cleveland collar counties, Columbus collar counties, and Cincinnati collar counties. And particularly when we dug further, we found it was really women voters that we weren't doing as well with compared to Michigan. Now, I don't know if you guys pay a lot of attention to politics in Michigan, but they do something different than they do in Ohio. And they run women for governor, and they run women for Senate, and they win. They're actually more electable. The Democratic Party in Ohio has been running a moderate white guy for 3 decades. It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now, they have a word for that. We're trying to make sure we move forward with a bold new agenda, with a different kind of leadership with Cheryl and I. And we're really excited to have the support of the Matriots, the support of Emily's List, and support of really all women's groups. The strength of this campaign has been women. And that's made me very, very proud. And we're really, really excited. Oh, you're right. Teresa Fetter is the candidate for lieutenant governor. I was thinking of the general, so I apologize for that. Thank you, Carolyn. So with that, Emily, I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to have a conversation here.
I appreciate that very much. And that was a great overview of not only your campaign, but where you're coming from, sort of the underlying reasons for what's driving you and Cheryl to be in this race. I appreciate my Matriots members reflecting back on previously endorsed candidate Teresa Fetter. So thank you to our Matriots members in the chat for that reminder. I want to start with something that is so deeply ingrained in the Matriots that we've been focused on since our inception. to think with you on, and that is the idea of nonpartisanship. So we at the Matriots we endorse both sides of the aisle. We endorse based on values, but we're not ostriches, right? We recognize that the state of Ohio is in a very partisan space. And so my first question to you is how you plan we're gonna just do what you did and skip all the way to the end. So once ascending to the seat of governor, how you plan to work from a bipartisan perspective or even a nonpartisan perspective to actually get work done, because I don't know that in this election cycle we're gonna flip the Ohio General Assembly and suddenly it will be a whole state of Democrats. So how are you going to work from a bipartisan or nonpartisan perspective for the state?
Well, certainly, I think it's a must, right? So we elect a Democratic governor, it becomes a bipartisan state, I think, which is actually more healthy for our politics. Right now, we have Mike DeWine, who's a Republican, and he is too afraid of his primary and his extreme radical base, which makes our politics become even more extreme because of that. And as governor, as a Democrat and as governor, that won't be a problem for us. We will be, trying to build consensus, frankly, with moderate Republicans. Now, I also think the redistricting issue is a really big issue here as well. It'll be easier for us to do that if we get fair maps. It's always a healthier democracy when the decisions are decided in generals, not primaries. And right now, that's not the case in the state legislature. And so getting just fair districts will move those races to the general election, and having them care about those voters that are everyone instead of just one party will help with the Matriots mission too, of not just of being more bipartisan and nonpartisan about what's best for Ohio. And see, that's not what you have right now at the state house. I mean, this is a big deal. You think of the corruption across the country. For Ohio to be called in a league of its own, the worst in the country, because there's only one party and they are very, very extreme on their politics. And then if they're not, it's really just about self-interest. And look, this isn't just from First Energy. If we were here 4 years ago, I would be talking about the electronic classrooms of tomorrow, where they had a big donor who had virtual classrooms with no students and sucked money out of our public schools. Or 6 years ago, when they had a big donor who wanted to make payday lending happen all across our communities and sucked money out of our poor communities. We had one of the highest interest rates in the country because of this big donor. Right now, without bipartisanship, without diversity of thought, that's all you see at the state house. And so there's a real opportunity here, both with electing a Democratic governor and with redistricting, to see a different kind of politics that is way, way, way like the rest of the state, frankly, more moderate than the extreme radical way we're being governed right now.
And I like your perspective on how we're going to get, if you're governor, how you're going to then move that piece forward, because we know that the governor has a seat at the redistricting table. Hopefully the redistricting table will have closed. Right. by that point in time. We can hope, we can send some, good wishes that direction.
Well, we're gonna continue to fight for that, right? That's something that 73% of Ohioans voted for, was to change the Constitution. We want them all to follow the law. This isn't that hard. And that's, I think, the other problem. Emily, I didn't mean to cut you off, but these guys, and they're mostly guys, haven't been following the law for years. They don't think the law even, it matters to them, which is pretty amazing, since they are lawmakers, that they don't think they have to follow the laws that they've created themselves. And, I think we need to make sure that we fight for fair districts. It is really, really crucial to the future democracy of Ohio.
We feel very strongly about it as well. So I appreciate those comments. We, as you know, here at the Matriots, we talk about 5 values. You talked about each of these in your interview with us. They don't surprise you in the least, but I want to start thinking about some of the values with you and talking with you about them. The first one that I want to focus on is dominion over our bodies, which is a value that we hold very deeply here at the Matriots. And we know, and and we've talked about this, that Roe v. Wade and other reproductive rights cases are making news at the national level. There's projections that the protections that currently exist in the law might be overturned by the Supreme Court that are there to help women and girls. and that the issue of reproductive rights might come back to the state of Ohio. I mean, we already occupy a large space around reproductive rights. But even more of that could come back to the Ohio General Assembly. What can you say about your plan, what you would do with regard to reproductive rights if you were elected into the seat of governor? How can you help protect women and girls?
Sure. This is something that's very personal to me as a woman, and something both Cheryl and I through our entire careers have been pro-choice. And I'm the only candidate, Democrat or Republican, that has been pro-choice my entire career. And look, this is a particularly unique time on this issue because Roe is likely to fall this summer. And I was born in 1976, for full disclosure, I'm 46 years old, and Roe passed in 1973. So pretty much women my age and younger always thought this would be a protection for us. And I know older women who fought for it told us that that wasn't the case. And I know the chicken has come home to roost now. It is true that this is a really, really big deal for women all across the country, and particularly in our state, and particularly young women that never thought this was going to happen. And we need to have someone in the governor's seat that is unequivocal around this issue. Now, I'm really glad that my opponent, the Democratic opponent for governor, has decided just a few months before he got into the governor's race that he is pro-choice, and we're glad to have him in the fold. But he has not taken action, and he has not done the work that really shows that he is going to be serious, very serious about this issue, where the governor is the last stop when it comes to women's health care and reproductive access and abortion access should Roe fall. And as governor, I'll make two key points. I will veto any bill that comes across my desk that affects women's healthcare access or access to abortion. And secondly, I will make sure that we have a pro-choice doctor as the head of the Department of Health, so they can work with groups that work to provide access across the state. There's actually a lot of flexibility that the governor has in this role, and I've seen it work against us when I've been fighting John Kasich and Mike DeWine on this issue in Dayton and Cincinnati. But look, Emily, you don't have to take my word for it. Pro-Choice Ohio, Planned Parenthood Action Fund has endorsed our ticket. Every group that has done work around women's healthcare access have endorsed us, which tells you just how important this race is and how they know who's best to protect women's healthcare access in the state.
And I haven't asked you this question particularly before, but I do wonder, is there a way to solidify that for after the term that you spend as governor? So, it seems like this is an issue that continues to vacillate in our state, and we get one governor in who says one thing, we get a next governor who says the next thing, we get an Ohio General Assembly who moves this way versus that way. And we had always assumed, as you said, I am a little younger than you even, I had not assumed that this would be something that would go away in my lifetime. And so to see now this vacillation, is there a way to instill policy around this for future generations from the governor's seat?
I mean, I think what's going to be key for us is, number one, stopping the bad that's happening right now. And then we're going to have to change legislation, because we thought, I think probably folks thought the most way to protect it was making it a protected right in the Supreme Court, and they've worked for 4 decades to change that. So this is going to be a long fight for us in protecting access in the state of Ohio. And it's going to have to start being something that people really pay attention to when they vote. 65% of Ohioans are pro-choice, but it is not their only issue. And so, this is going to have to become a more key issue when people go to vote, because we have to protect women's access to healthcare for, our children and grandchildren and the women that come after us.
That's absolutely right. And I see Andy from Northwest Ohio is commenting here, keep electing women. That's our thing. And so I think that is an incredibly important exclamation point on what you just said, Nan. Moving to one of our other issues that we're very passionate about here at the Matriots, we think about access to education, and not just access to education for young children, which I know has been a deep platform issue for you since you were the mayor of Dayton, and you're thinking very critically about preschool and preschool access for all. And as a mom of young children, I can say thank you so much. That sounds fantastic. But we also know that currently there are divisive issues affecting access to education, including school transportation at the state level, curriculum issues like House Bill 616 and other similar restrictions on inclusive teaching, school vouchers, and school funding. As governor, what is your plan to empower the Ohio Department of Education and teachers and schools to ensure that children actually have access to education? What do you think?
Right. I mean, it's pretty scary right now, just the full-on attacks from funding, from local control, from the privatization of public education that's going on right now in the state legislature. So this is, honestly, Emily, could be something we talk about for an hour about what we could do, because education is such a key part of what the state's role is, to provide funding to local communities, to provide strong education, regardless of what community they live in. But let me make a couple of points I think that's really, really important. Number one, the state legislature only partially funded what we call the Sweeney-Patterson bill, or the Cupp-Patterson bill, to really make funding more fair. So we need to make sure that that happens all the way through. It's a 6-year plan that's only been funded for 2 years. So making sure that happens, so we have funding regardless of what community you live in, you have fair funding across the state. Number two, we have to fight against the backpack bill, is what they call it. It's basically the privatization of public education, making vouchers everywhere across the state. And look, as the former mayor of Dayton, 20 years ago, when John Husted was first Speaker of the House, they had a failed idea to experiment on Dayton's children by opening the Pandora's box of charter schools and vouchers in Dayton first. And Dayton actually led the country in the number of children in charters until Hurricane Katrina happened in New Orleans. And what I've seen from that is, number one, there's no regulations around charters. They have their tests and their scores are actually worse than the public school system. And it fragments the public education system in a way that is very, very hard, if not impossible, to rebuild. And so we've seen what's happened. This is a failed idea that should not go across the state, and local jurisdictions and local school boards and property values will be affected by this decision, in addition to our children not being as well educated. So the privatization of education is a very big issue. And then finally, we know that, and I know there's educators and folks on this call that work with our kids every day. We know that the best indicator is actually if parents are involved in their students, or an adult is involved with their students' education. We want that, but we also want to make sure that our kids are taught American history, both the good and the bad, so we don't repeat it. This is not hard stuff. There's common sense actions being led by families across the state. And frankly, when some radical extremists tried to take school boards across the state last year, they were not successful. Normal people won with these ideas. And so we've got to continue to make sure that people stay versed and stay engaged, because these are ideas that the majority of people believe in. They want good schools that their kids can go to. And, they want to make sure that they get a good, strong education. We've got to make sure and stay awake and stay open in the issue of local education, right? And the governor has a huge role on that. Now let's compare that to Mike DeWine, who again is afraid of the radicals in his party. What did he do after some of his own appointees on the Board of Education called racism a public health emergency? He asked them to resign. He asked them to resign because he was too afraid of what the extremists in his party would think. Like, that's the kind of leadership we have right now at the State House, and we deserve so much better. We deserve a lot more common sense and someone who is unafraid of what extremists are going to do in the Republican Party.
Well, and that brings us to a question about, it's more specifically about House Bill 616 and similar laws that are being introduced that are of themselves divisive, right? And they seek to use inclusivity language and reverse it, right? So they try to look like they are incredibly inclusive, and yet manage to be even more harmful to communities from an equity landscape or from an equity lens. What can be done specifically on these kinds of laws, right? Those that refuse to recognize historic mistreatment or marginalization. What can be done to move Ohio forward instead of backward? And we'll come back to this issue when we think about economic empowerment, but I just can't imagine large companies that we're trying to attract to Ohio. I won't name any names, but large companies that we're trying to bring here, wanting to bring all of their talent and their treasure to Ohio when we have such divisive laws on the books.
Right. So, I mean, I think, Emily, you've answered this for sure. This is what we say over and over again. First of all, from a civil rights perspective, these laws like the Don't Say Gay bill pushing our state backwards on those issues. But secondly, it's also bad business, right? If inclusive states are growing states. Inclusive states get strong companies with good wages to come into their community. Inclusive states keep their young people in their state. I'd like to say that the biggest export in Ohio is manufacturing. I think it's actually our young people, where we lose them to go to other states that are more inclusive and have better paying jobs. There's a definite effort where that aligns, and that is not that this is a way for us to lose those opportunities. I'm really proud of my record as mayor. If you talk to the LGBT community here in Dayton, they call me their strongest ally. I was the first person. I performed the first same-sex marriage in the state of Ohio, an hour and 3 minutes after Obergefell fell. It was very special. It was personal friends of mine that I was able to do that. I think I've been on the front lines of these fights as well. And we have other fights too that we want to be proactive in. Like, for example, making sure that, LGBT folks can't be kicked out of their house or be fired because of their sexual orientation. We've introduced this, I think now 9 times in the state legislature. Again, opportunities for us to show inclusivity, that will show growth, that will show good paying jobs moving forward. They are connected. And that's why, even if this isn't a community that necessarily affects you, I think it probably does. You probably know somebody if you aren't yourself, but even if it doesn't, it affects how we can keep good paying jobs and future jobs here in Ohio.
Well, and one of the questions I had received in my email, I sent out a note to our members saying, if you have a question for Nan and I have time to ask it, what would it be? And one of those questions was about brain drain and what do we do about brain drain? And so thank you for answering that and for thinking around that issue as we, I think your comment on it being the major export of our state is challenging to us all, but also a really thoughtful way to engage on that. I'm seeing some comments in the chat. I know I'm going to catch up, I promise, Matriots, with your questions that you have over here in the chat. Many of them are on our list of questions that we've been working through, but I haven't heard this. Does the Cupp-Patterson law actually get us to an educational funding model that is constitutional? So I see that from one of our very thoughtful board members. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, so like I said, it is a good step, is I think the way we would define it. And it's the first step we've really seen in 30 years, right, since DeRolf. The challenge is they only funded it for 2 years, and it needs to be a 6-year path. And so now we have to go back and fight for that again. And the legislature, being as radical as it is, can be difficult. So that's our concern moving forward on it. Excuse me.
Thank you. You're excused. Okay. The next up on our list of values, we've talked about dominion over our bodies. We've walked a little bit through access to education. And I guess before we leave access to education, there's one other chat question that I think you answered the question on low performing charter schools. But if we look at high performing charter schools, how do we ensure that those charter schools or the access to that type of education, if it's actually high performing, is either still available or the concept is still around for our students?
Look, I think that we just don't regulate charter schools the way we do public schools. I think that's the big issue. I mean, and there are even high performing charter schools that aren't even interested in coming in Ohio. Charter advocates have even called Ohio the Wild West of charter schools, right? So we have got to get real regulations around these for-profit charters. And I think it is incredibly unfair the way that they are treated with less rigor than the public education system. And I think that would help and go a long way. And I, frankly, I've talked to high performing chart. We have and I mean, this is the point. In Dayton, we probably have 2 high performing charters and so many dozens that are not. And, I think to the point where the high performing charters don't even like to be called charters, right? So they know this is a problem. And with better regulations, you could definitely, I think, see that work out fine. The issue of the unregulation and the lack of regulation around charters is a huge issue for our kids. And frankly, it's happening only in urban communities, and people aren't paying as much attention as they should on it.
Thank you. I know that was a little off the cuff, but I think that's so important to think both about those that are high performing and those that are maybe struggling a little bit, and how do we make a standardization across the board for them. The next value that I wanted to think about, we received a lot of questions from our community, from our Matriots members in this area. And I also have seen a few scrolling through the chat on the right-hand side, so I'll try to capture them in my question. Are safe and healthy communities in which to raise our families? That is a basic need of everyone, to have a healthy and safe place where you can raise your family. And it is one of the core Matriots values. And so what are some of the ways that, you've talked a little bit about the KKK rallies, you've talked about some of the policing struggles, but what are some of the ways that, in your history, that Dayton used to address the community policing problem, to improve safety for all while addressing unjust policing practices? And this is a question from Diane Meaves, who's a member from the Columbus area, that I wanted to expressly point out.
Right. So no matter what community you live in Ohio, you deserve to go to bed at night without the fear of violence in your neighborhood. And so as mayors, I always say we have to hold both ideas in our hand. We need to make sure that we have police and that police are available, and then we have to make sure that police treat everyone, regardless of what folks look like, with dignity and respect with every interaction. And I think that's completely doable, and we should expect that from our public servants. And so I'm proud as my time of Dayton, we actually increased the number of officers on our streets, and our neighborhoods and community want that. At the same time, we did police reform that brought clergy, activists, and police together to find a way forward so we could really make our police department more fair and more just. And these are not easy conversations. This isn't magic. This is hard work of consensus building and really having discussions on what kind of community we want to live in. But I'm really proud of the work that Daytonians did on this. And we've had changes, for example, like alternative response model, which is being piloted this year in Dayton. So when you call 911, perhaps you don't get just a police officer for every single issue. I also like to point out that alternative response model happened years ago when they added ambulances to 911. Before, it would be a police officer that would come for your heart attack, and that didn't work out so well. So making sure, police officers, ambulances, or maybe a mediation specialist that can help you get mental health services. These are the kind of things that we need. And making sure that every answer just isn't a police officer, I think, is really important for our community. Also changing the use of force rules in our cities is really important. So, again, I think people are demanding to be policed in a different way. Communities are listening, and they should listen and respond. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we have a good number of police officers and that we have the number of police officers we need to make sure that our communities are safe. So I think mayors understand that. I've definitely been doing that work in Dayton these past few years. But I also want to point out there's another issue of safety that the state could do a lot more on, and that's obviously common sense gun safety, right? When Mike DeWine said that he would do something after the August 4th, 2019 shootings in Dayton, never in my worst nightmare did I think that he was going to do something to make it worse. Right? By signing the Stand Your Bill legislation and permitless concealed carry, he has made our communities less safe. Permitless concealed carry, police officers are even against, because again, when they're pulling someone over, they now have they're not required to ask or tell folks. People aren't required to tell police officers right away that they have a concealed weapon in their car. So just imagine how much more fraught these interactions can be between police and citizens. Stand your ground laws across the country have shown that they make our communities less safe, particularly our communities of color. as governor, I'm where 9 out of 10 Ohioans are with universal background checks. 9 out of 10 Ohioans don't agree that the Buckeyes are the best football team. So this is pretty much an agreement across the state. And we need to make sure that we move this. And if we don't move it through the legislature, to use the bully pulpit to make changes to make our communities more safe. Just this past year, the number of people dying in the country from a handgun actually passed the number of people dying from accidents on highways. Think about that. That's the kind of situation we're in the state. And we have a governor too weak to stand up to radicals and actually signs and takes actions to make our community less safe. And we deserve much better than that.
And I know that that is an area that many of our members have been concerned about. It was the next question I was going to ask from Northeast Ohio, from Linda Hummel, was about what you would do on gun safety, gun control, and what appears to be counter to healthy and safe communities in the state of Ohio. And similarly, I saw a few of those questions roll past us here on the chat as well. So thank you for addressing that head on and telling us how you're planning to address the issues on gun control. I think another issue that this is a totally different, it's a totally different perspective on healthy and safe communities. So I'm going to move from gun control, which hurts my heart, to another issue that also hurts our hearts, but in a different way, on an environmental question. Margot Puffenberger, who's one of our endorsed candidates up in Northwest Ohio from Maumee, asked this question, which I think is a really interesting one. She said, how do you plan to address the causes and symptoms of environmental issues when we think about clean water, clean air, that kind of healthy, safe community? How do you plan to address the algal blooms and similar issues? And then I'm going to partner that with some questions I've seen through the chat where our members, we have members all across the state. We actually have 5 hives: Northeast, Northwest, Southwest, Southeast. Let's go that way, and Central Ohio. And our members in rural Ohio have been wondering, where does the Democratic Party stand on rural Ohio? How are you going to make sure that you engage with rural Ohio? So if we can do kind of the environmental algal bloom, agriculture, big ag question alongside the question of what do we do about including rural Ohio in the plans for the state?
Sure. So look, I'm proud to be endorsed by the mayor of Toledo, Wade Kapsakavich, as well as I think about 25 mayors across the state. And this is an issue particularly in Northwest Ohio, where I do think H2 open for business, which with the state move forward, is a good carrot. But you also need to have a stick on these issues because we're talking about agribusiness here. We're not talking about small farmers. We're talking about big multinational corporations that are doing a lot of this phosphorus runoff. And we have to have rules that if they don't do what needs to be done, that they will be fined and we can force them to do it, because it's about, our second most important asset beside our children is making sure that our water is clean. It's one of the biggest assets, particularly for Northern Ohio. But it affects even down in Southern Ohio. The algae blooms from the lake come down the watershed into Dayton, and we have to clean that, and our citizens have to clean that through the stormwater sewer system, right? And so making sure the people that have caused that pay for it, I think, is really, really important. I'm gonna get a sip here.
I'll let you sip water, breathe.
Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes I talk so much during the day, I get like a frog in my throat.
No, I think it's fine. We have all been there. And if there is a space for grace and allowing for a woman to take a sip of water, this is the community that would allow you to do that. So take the moment you need.
Thank you. So I think that's really important around the work, having both the incentive and the regulation together at the same time is really key for our state. And this is something we just can't keep on holding and waiting for. And the phosphorus runoff issue is the issue. Secondly, when you talk about Southern Ohio, we actually last month unveiled our Southern Ohio plan. And you can check it again at nanwhaley.com. It's in our /policy. You can see it there. The mayors of Athens, Chillicothe, Belpre, and Ironton all helped us with this policy. It's around making sure cities actually get their settlements from the opioid epidemic so they can actually work on addiction services and meet folks in the throes of addiction where they are, much like the lessons we've learned in Dayton. beginning broadband access to all of Southern Ohio by 2028. There's a lot of money in the infrastructure plan. We have to make sure that happens. And right now, I'll tell you, if this state house is in charge, they will just pass the money over to the telecom industry, and we will not see that investment in places that are hard to reach, like rural and Southern Ohio. The state needs to be engaged in that and push forward. I always tell folks, if we were waiting for corporations to provide us electricity, we'd all still be in the dark in Southern Ohio. So, the government has to move on this. And then also really supporting our veterans. I'm the only candidate, we're the only candidates for governor and lieutenant governor that have a veterans plan. Cheryl's dad was a retired U.S. Air Force veteran. That's how she actually ended in Ohio. And we have a lot of veterans in the state. And so, and particularly in Southern Ohio, where we're fighting the closure of the VA in Chillicothe. And then, providing veterans homes across the state so people don't have to make a decision about Georgetown or Sandusky as a VA home, the only two in the state, having more across the state as well. So those are the key parts of our plan. In addition, of course, we're mayors. And so we think, local control and giving funding to local communities and local education so they don't have to raise property taxes every time they want to provide basic services is something that the state needs to do. We've seen an incredible increase these past few years because of the cuts the states have made to local communities, that communities that can raise their property taxes and communities that can't do without. And it's made our state even more less equal. So those are the things that we're doing, particularly on Southern Ohio as well.
That was such a comprehensive answer, and thank you for you spoke through it. And I know that we're coming up on our hour. As fast as this has gone, I have so many more questions, both through the chat and then also in my list of questions. One that keeps coming up that I'm going to ask, even if it ends up being the last question I get to ask, is we drive towards women's economic empowerment and women's empowerment generally, but specifically thinking about how we ensure that our number one consumers in the state have money in their pocket, and that they're at the table when there's planning on key economic developments, like some key economic developments that might be happening in, Licking County or so. When we think about some large deals that are coming to Ohio, and some large manufacturers, large businesses, how do we ensure that women-owned businesses are part of that plan? And you had mentioned way at the top of the hour that you're focused on small businesses, and many small businesses are women-owned and minority-owned. How are we going to engage with those and make sure that they get fair access to some of the to being part of the conversation when we talk about large deals like the business partners out east?
Well, look, I think the Intel deal is a great example of this, and I'll compare it to the Peloton deal of Northwest Ohio. Look, I think in general, we're obviously happy that this investment's coming to Ohio. It does mean good, high-paying jobs, we think. And the people of Ohio have invested $2 billion into this. Now, one of the things that's really important about this is that we need to make sure what's in it for Ohio, and make sure that there's transparency around these agreements, because that's where we can make sure that we are getting a good number for women-owned and minority-owned businesses to be partners in this. They thrive from it, that the jobs that are being provided are good paying and they're treating the workers with respect, not just the jobs that build the place, but the jobs that clean the place and take care of the place, making sure that those are good paying as well. And, as investors, as partners, basically, as the state of Ohio is with Intel at $2 billion, we have a right to make sure that our people get good paying, decent jobs, and that there's opportunities for entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs and minority-owned entrepreneurs to have those partnerships and grow themselves, right? And so I always like to point out that Governor DeWine likes to come to the ribbon cutting, but the details sometimes don't always work out. And an example of that is the same week that Intel was announced, Peloton, that he went to the ribbon cutting in Wood County, that was supposed to create 2,000 jobs, announced that they were pulling out the same week. Right. So we have to do better in this state about the details of the deal, because the governor seems to be more interested in the big announcement rather than making sure that everybody gets what we need out of these from our state investment. And I think that's a really important point. And as governor, that would be really important to me.
Well, and I know that some of our members, the last question that they were hoping I was going to ask you is, what is your plan to beat Mike DeWine, if it's Mike DeWine or whoever the Republican is? But I feel like I should probably save that question for when you come, not if, but when you come back after the primary, and we can think strategy. We can think strategy and thought processing for your general. If you have a couple thoughts that you want to add here, we're coming up on the hour, so I want to make sure I
Sure.
give my members. I'm respectful of their time, but what would you like to say as a parting comment to our group?
Well, let me make a couple of comments. And yes, I will definitely come back after the primary, right? We're very excited. We're excited about this race. It's 15 days to the primary. If I have an ask of your members, it's a couple of things. First, please vote in the May 3rd Democratic primary. You can vote early right now. Please tell your friends there's a May 3rd primary. I've talked to a number of people because of the chaos with this primary legislative and primary. And again, the radicals in the party of the state house like this, people don't really know there is a May 3rd primary for the governor's race. So if you can tell your friends, tell your neighbors to please vote for the Whaley Stevens ticket on May 3rd, that their Matriots endorsed, will make a big difference. We are really excited about this race. We've gotten good numbers back. We're up by double digits right now in the primary, but we're not taking anything for granted. And so we're counting on you all to with this endorsement, to share about us. And you can share information at nanwhaley.com and share it with your friends. If you're willing to volunteer with us for the last 2 weeks of the primary, again, go to nanwhaley.com and please sign up. And then, as you all know, it is about the funding for this race that is so important. That's why we're so, again, grateful the Matriots are smart, and they always send funding with their endorsed candidates, which make a big difference. But if you have any extra dollars to support us, particularly to get through the primary, it is truly, truly appreciated. This is a grassroots effort. Cheryl and I are the only non-millionaires in this race. And so we're trying hard. And it's with your help that we can get this done. So those are the things I ask right now, Emily, in respect of time, and we'll see you after the primary to talk about the general.
That sounds fantastic. That sounds very good. And we as Matriots, we always want to say one of the things that you can do is not only get out the vote, but also join the Matriots, or renew your pledge if you're up for renewal. We are counting on you to be able to continue to endorse fantastic candidates like Nan, getting women elected across the state of Ohio. That is our goal and our mission. This year, our women are running in some races that they're not even sure who they're running against or where exactly they're running, but they are running. And so if you can help us out by joining the Matriots, we would so appreciate that. Or I guess you are all either members or have been members before, so we would love to see a renewal from you. We're here to answer your questions. Feel free to send me an email. You can click on the link to talk with Abby there, Abby Manley, our Director of Development and Membership, and our website is matriotsohio.com. It is so fantastic to see you all, to be in community with you all, and to be in community with Nan. Thank you so much for joining us, Nan, this evening. We appreciate your time, your energy, and carrying the torch of the Matriots forward. Thank you so much all, and have a wonderful evening out there.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go to my gallery view here so I can see you all as you leave. Bye. Thank you. Bye, Pam. Goodbye. Oh, bye, Carolyn. Oh, bye, Jan. See you later, Jaren. Hey, thank you, Carolyn.